My neighbor expected me to pay for his fence, claiming, "It'll make both our properties look better." When I refused, he built it on my land and threatened legal action if I took it down. I hired a surveyor and said, "Funny how the law works against liars." When I moved into my house in a quiet Ohio suburb, I looked forward to peaceful living and friendly neighbors. The neighborhood was filled with well-kept lawns and modest homes, and I was eager to settle in. Little did I know my neighbor, whom I'll call Greg, would soon become the source of unexpected conflict. One Saturday morning, as I was watering my front lawn, Greg approached me. He was a man in his late 40s, with a stocky build and a confident stride. We exchanged pleasantries before he got to his point. "I've been thinking," Greg began, leaning slightly on the waist-high chain-link fence that separated our yards. "This old fence has seen better days. Don't you think our properties would look much better with a new wooden fence?" I glanced at the fence. It was a bit worn but still functional. Replacing it hadn't crossed my mind. "I hadn't really considered it," I replied honestly. Greg nodded, as if anticipating my response. "I got a quote from a contractor. A solid wooden fence would cost around $6,000. If we split it, that's $3,000 each. It's an investment, but think about the boost in property value and the enhanced privacy." The amount made me pause. As a recent homeowner, my finances were tight. "I understand the benefits, Greg, but $3,000 is a lot for me right now. I think the current fence serves its purpose." His expression tightened slightly. "I get it, but this is about more than just aesthetics. It's about increasing our property values and ensuring privacy. Plus, a new fence would last for decades." I appreciated his perspective but remained firm. "I understand where you're coming from, but I can't commit to that expense at this time." Greg's jaw clenched, but he forced a smile. "All right, I respect your decision." With that, he turned and walked back to his house. A week later, I returned home from work to the sound of construction. To my surprise, a crew was dismantling the old fence. Greg stood nearby, overseeing the work. Confused, I approached him. "Greg, what's going on?" "I thought we agreed not to proceed with the new fence." He turned to me, a hint of irritation in his eyes. "I decided to go ahead with it. I believe it's the best choice for both our properties." I felt a surge of frustration. "But I didn't agree to this. And it looks like the new posts are being set on my property." Greg waved a dismissive hand. "The workers assured me they're placing it on the property line. Trust me, it's all above board." I wasn't convinced. "I need to verify that. Until then, I can't allow this to continue on my property." He sighed, clearly annoyed. "Look, the work's already in progress. Stopping now would be a waste of time and money." I stood my ground. "I understand, but I need to ensure my property rights are respected." Greg's eyes narrowed. "Fine. Do what you need to do." He turned abruptly and walked away, leaving the workers in awkward silence. That evening, I reviewed my property documents but couldn't determine the exact boundary lines. Unsure of my next steps, I decided to consult a local property attorney. The attorney listened to my concerns and advised, "The first step is to get a professional survey done. This will clarify the property boundaries and provide concrete evidence if there's an encroachment." Taking his advice, I hired a licensed surveyor. Over the next few days, they conducted measurements and placed markers indicating the true property lines. The results were clear. The new fence encroached approximately 2 feet into my property. Armed with the survey results, I approached Greg the next day. He was in his driveway, polishing his car. "Greg, can we talk?" I began. He glanced up, a guarded expression on his face. "What is it now?" I handed him a copy of the survey. "The survey shows that the new fence is 2 feet into my property." He scanned the document, his brow furrowing. "These surveys can be off. Are you sure this is accurate?" I nodded. "It's conducted by a licensed professional. I trust its accuracy." Greg's demeanor shifted. "So, what do you want to do about it?" I took a deep breath. I need the fence moved to the correct property line. He scoffed. Do you know how much that will cost? It's not just about moving a few posts. I understand it's an inconvenience, but it's important to respect property boundaries, I replied. Greg's face reddened. I can't believe this. After Greg's face reddened. I can't believe this. After I did all the work to improve both our yards, this is how you repay me. I stood my ground. Greg, I didn't ask you to do this. You ignored what I said. You put a fence on my land, and now you're upset because I won't pretend it's okay? He threw the survey papers onto his hood like they were garbage. Fine. You want to play hardball? You're going to regret this. I didn't respond. I just walked back inside and locked the door. Later that night, I heard something outside. When I looked out the window, I saw Greg walking the fence line with a flashlight and a tape measure. He was muttering to himself. It gave me a bad feeling in my gut. This wasn't just about a fence anymore. It was personal. The next morning, I found a letter taped to my front door. It was a formal-looking document, clearly not from a lawyer, more like something printed from a free online template. Greg was demanding payment for shared property improvements. He wanted $3,000 and gave me a 2-week deadline before further action. I ignored it. A few days later, my trash bins were knocked over. Then I noticed my garden hose had been slashed. At first, I thought maybe it was a raccoon or some animal. But then I found footprints. Big ones. Greg wears work boots everywhere. Same tread. No doubt in my mind. I called the police, not to press charges yet, but just to start a paper trail. The officer took a report, walked around my yard, nodded, and said, "Keep documenting everything. Take pictures, get a camera if you don't have one. If he's harassing you, we'll need evidence." So I bought a few trail cams and put them up. One pointed straight at the fence. Another covered my front yard. Within 48 hours, I had footage of Greg walking onto my property at night with a hammer. He pulled a board off the fence and repositioned it slightly, farther into my yard. I gave the footage to the police. They visited Greg the next day. I watched from my kitchen window. He stood with his arms crossed, yelling and pointing at my house. The officers stayed calm. I didn't know what they said, but when they left, Greg slammed his front door so hard the windows rattled. That afternoon, I came home to find a for sale sign staked in his yard. My heart leapt. Was he leaving? No, he wasn't. A week later, a man knocked on my door. He introduced himself as Marcus, a real estate agent. Greg says there's a dispute about the fence, he said. Is there a legal issue I should know about before we list the property? I handed him a copy of the survey and police report. Marcus read them and nodded slowly. Okay, this'll make it tough. I'll talk to him. That night, Greg pounded on my door. I didn't answer. He shouted, "You just love ruining people's lives, don't you? You're gonna pay for this, one way or another." I recorded every word from behind the door. The next morning, my car had a long scratch down one side. Deep. Like someone used a key. My camera hadn't caught it, wrong angle. That was my fault. Still, I added it to the police report. At this point, I was exhausted. I wasn't sleeping well. I dreaded walking outside. My house, my safe space, felt like a target. I started to think maybe Greg would never stop. Then I got a letter in the mail. This time from a real lawyer. Greg was suing me. The claim? He said I had intentionally interfered with shared property development and damaged his property value through baseless police involvement. He was asking for $10,000 in damages and court fees. I felt sick, but I didn't panic. I took the letter to my own lawyer. We sat down, went over everything, and he said, "This is junk, but we're going to respond seriously." He filed a countersuit. Trespassing. Property damage. Harassment. False legal action. Greg wasn't expecting that. He stormed into my yard the next day, shouting, "You think you're clever? You think the law is on your side?" I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Funny how the law works against liars." He froze. His mouth opened like he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. Then he turned and walked away. What he didn't know yet was that I had more evidence. Audio, video, witnesses. Even his own contractor was willing to testify that Greg had directed the build a bit over the property line because he wanted more space. The court date was coming up, and Greg was about to learn just how bad of a mistake he had made by underestimating me. Greg didn't show his face for a few days after our last exchange. His house was quiet. The for sale sign disappeared overnight, like he had finally accepted he wasn't going anywhere soon. But that wasn't a win. It just meant he was staying and planning something. I kept up with my routine, but I was always watching. Every noise made me jump. I didn't trust that it was over. Then one evening, a city inspector showed up at my door. "I'm here to inspect the modifications made to your property," the man said, clipboard in hand. I blinked. I didn't modify anything. He raised an eyebrow. There was an anonymous complaint submitted about unpermitted structural changes, retaining wall, fence line extension, possible code violations. My stomach dropped. He walked around the property with me, pointed at the fence. "This looks new." I explained everything. I even showed him the survey. He took photos, wrote down notes, and said, "We'll be in touch. If there's been any illegal modification on your part, you could face a fine." I knew immediately Greg had made the complaint. It was a weak attempt to flip the situation. I called my lawyer again. He sighed and said, "People like him throw everything they can when they feel cornered." The city followed up a few days later, no violations on my end. They closed the complaint. Another false move by Greg. But it still rattled me. Things went quiet again for a few weeks. No yelling, no midnight fence tampering, no scratched car. I started to hope maybe he was backing off. Maybe the court notice had finally gotten through to him. Then, one Saturday morning, I saw a moving truck in front of Greg's house. I thought maybe he was finally leaving. But no, he wasn't moving out. He was renting his house. 2 days later, a group of college-aged guys moved in. Loud music, beer cans in the yard, motorcycles coming and going at all hours. I found out from another neighbor that Greg had rented the house to friends of a friend while he took a break from the drama. I couldn't prove it, but it felt like retaliation. One night around 1 a.m., there was a loud crash behind my house. I ran outside with a flashlight and saw the fence, Greg's fence, was split. Someone had plowed through it with an ATV. The vehicle was gone, tire marks in the grass. One of the new tenants' bikes had paint scratches and a bent fender the next morning. I reported it. Again. Police came out, took photos, made notes. I handed them more footage. They questioned the renters, but no one admitted to anything. The damage wasn't on their side of the property line. It was on mine. My yard. My problem. My lawyer added it to our file. Then another twist. One of the other neighbors, Mrs. Kaplan, an older widow who'd lived on the street for 30 years, came to me with a folder. She said quietly, "I think you should have this. Greg tried to pull something similar years ago." I opened the folder and found printed emails, notes, and a copy of a small claims court filing. Greg had accused her of damaging his sprinkler system when she had her lawn redone. She'd won the case barely. It was the same pattern. Fake accusations, threats, false charges, pressure to settle. Her words stuck with me. "He pushes and pushes, hoping you'll break before he does." It gave me more fire to keep going. Court was getting closer. Greg must have sensed the tide turning because that's when he pulled the most surprising move yet. He knocked on my door. I didn't answer, but I watched him through the peephole. He wasn't angry. He wasn't yelling. He looked nervous. He left an envelope on my doormat and walked away. Inside was a typed letter, no return address, no signature. It said, "We've both gone too far. Maybe we should find a way to settle this outside of court. I'm willing to remove the fence. You drop the suit. No more trouble." I didn't respond. I gave it straight to my lawyer. He advised we keep moving forward. A settlement now after everything he'd done? After trying to ruin me, harass me, sue me, and something still didn't feel right. 2 nights later, the cops came to my door. Someone had filed a noise complaint against me. Said I was blasting music at 2 a.m., said it had been an ongoing problem. I don't even own a stereo. I was asleep when they showed up. The police took one look around, apologized, and left. But now I knew. Greg wasn't trying to settle. He was trying to bait me into dropping the case. He was building a new paper trail. Trying to make me look like the problem. Trying to build a false narrative before the court date. I went back through every file, every photo, every video clip. My lawyer pulled out the timestamps, the complaint records, the neighbor testimonies, even the contractor's statements. And then we found something big. One of the construction workers who built the fence had posted a photo on Instagram months ago. It showed Greg standing over the plans with a coffee in hand. The caption said, "When the client says, just move it a bit over, he won't even notice." My lawyer laughed out loud. That's the smoking gun. We reached out to the worker through his public contact info. He remembered Greg. Said he'd testify. Said he felt weird about the job but needed the paycheck. That photo, that caption. It tied everything together. Greg had knowingly crossed the property line. Lied about it. Tried to intimidate me. And now everything he'd done to twist the truth was about to be used against him. Court was coming up. And now I wasn't just ready. I was going to win. Court day arrived on a gray, cold morning. I didn't sleep the night before. My stomach was tight, my hands cold. But I was ready. My lawyer had a thick folder with all the evidence, photos, videos, the survey, police reports, Greg's letter, and most important, that Instagram post. Greg showed up wearing a press suit and fake confidence. He walked in like he had nothing to worry about, but he kept glancing over at me. His lawyer looked young, probably fresh out of law school, trying hard to appear calm. We sat through some minor cases before ours was called. Then it began. Greg's side opened with a polished speech. His lawyer talked about neighborly disputes, misunderstandings, and how my client made every effort to improve the property values for the entire block. He said I had agreed verbally that I was only mad after the fence was finished. He even said Greg offered to take down the fence to avoid drama, and I refused. Then my side started. My lawyer didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He laid out the facts, one by one. The survey showing the fence on my land. The video footage of Greg trespassing. The audio recording of Greg threatening me. The city inspector's report. The police complaints. The scratched car. The ATV fence crash. And finally, he showed the judge the Instagram post. The courtroom went silent. The judge looked at the image for a long time, then looked at Greg. "Did you instruct the construction team to move the fence onto your neighbor's property?" Greg fumbled. "No, I don't know where that photo came from." "We have the original file metadata," my lawyer added. "We also have the contractor's statement, willing to testify today." Greg's lawyer leaned over and whispered something to him. Greg didn't respond. He just stared ahead, pale and quiet. The judge ordered a short recess. When we returned, the mood had shifted. The judge came down hard. He ruled that the fence was an intentional encroachment. Greg was ordered to remove the entire fence within 30 days, pay for the removal and restore my property to original condition, cover my legal fees and court costs, pay additional damages for harassment and trespassing. It was more than just a legal win. It was complete public humiliation for Greg. But that wasn't the end. A week later, his renters got noise violations and were evicted after neighbors filed multiple complaints. Then the HOA got involved. They started an investigation into Greg for past complaints from other residents. Turns out Mrs. Kaplan wasn't the only one he tried to mess with. A former neighbor came forward with receipts from a broken mailbox incident Greg tried to blame on teenagers. Greg's little kingdom was falling apart. And me? I thought I was done with it. I was ready to move on. But the stress of the year had taken a toll. I was angry all the time. I double-checked locks. I avoided the yard. The fight changed me more than I wanted to admit. So I made a mistake too. I didn't stop. Even after the win, I posted the whole story online, every detail, including the court ruling, the photo, the police reports. I didn't name him, but I didn't need to. Someone in town shared it. People figured it out fast. It went viral. Greg lost his job within weeks. His company didn't want drama tied to their name. He tried to sue me again for defamation. But this time, nobody believed him. The judge tossed it out in 10 minutes. He had to sell his house. Not because of me, but because no one would rent from him anymore. Contractors wouldn't take his calls. He was known as the guy who tried to steal his neighbor's yard and got wrecked by a surveyor. Last I heard, he moved out of state. I felt good for a while, but it didn't feel like a clean victory. More like scorched earth. Yeah, I stood my ground. Yeah, I won. But it came at a cost. Now I keep my fence line sharp and my cameras rolling. And I don't trust quiet neighbors anymore.